Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I am your host, Beth Bailey, and today I am so excited to bring on Fahim Abed. Fahim is an investigative editor with Lighthouse Reports and the 2023 Nieman Fellow from Harvard. He was a reporter for the New York Times in Afghanistan until the Taliban takeover of the country in August of 2021. And Fahim, it is just such a pleasure to have you here, although the topic that we're going to talk about is really not pleasurable in any way. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, it is my pleasure. So would you like to give some background on the investigative report that you've been working on most recently and what spawned the effort to do this investigation at this particular point in time?
So we have been investigating the casualties of Afghan security forces, and for the past 6 months we have been working on this project, through which we were able to confirm killing of 110 members of former Afghan National and Defense Forces between 2023 and 2025. And 18 of these cases happened in the first 7 months of this year. And the reason that we started investigating it at this point, as you asked, is because right after the collapse, all cameras were on Afghanistan, and New York Times with 8 a.m. did an investigation in the 6 months after the Taliban takeover, and they identified that there were a lot of revenge killing by the Taliban. But after that, international media kind of walk away from the topic, and we have been hearing about the killings. We had a similar investigation for the UK left behind forces, for the UK allies, and then when we start hearing about special forces, so we felt the need to do an investigation for this important topic. And when we start looking into it, it was really bad than what we thought. The figures that we confirmed, it was mainly reported by two of our Afghan media partners, and then it was verified with a military source who had very good contacts in former Afghan military. So part of that, we thought to paint a picture of the current situation, because as you know, with the new administration in the US, the pathways for these former special forces who worked closely with American forces was kind of closed or suspended, and they were in real danger back in Afghanistan. So we thought there is a need to look into this topic and paint the real picture of what's happening on the ground.
Absolutely. That's such an important thing, and I agree. I remember watching, it was so important. I started covering post-withdrawal Afghanistan really closely in like November of 2021, and I was getting all these reports from veteran-run evacuation groups saying, hey, no, our people are getting slaughtered. And editors wouldn't take that seriously from some publications because there was no one out there doing the reporting. And I remember when the first New York Times reprisal count and Human Rights Watch came out and all these groups started coming out, and I thought, thank goodness, somebody's finally doing the real hard work. And that's why this is so important right now, because we have forgotten. And especially, like you say, US rap is paused. And that's, I guess this is, I thought we would cover this later, but I think this would be a good time to explain why special forces are a special target and why they have been abandoned by the US once again now. So starting out, why do you think the Taliban are so intent on killing special forces personnel in particular?
I think the Taliban are very much afraid of a resistant force that can form in Afghanistan. And that's why, if you remember, right after the collapse of the government, they were very tough on Panjshir. They had with all their forces, they were present there. They still have a very heavy presence on the ground to make sure there's no resistance. And that's because some of the special forces flee to the mountains in Panjshir, and they were trying to continue the resistance from there. So for them, it's very important to not have any possibility, like even they cannot imagine the possibility of having anyone resist them. And the special forces have a very good potential. They have the right training. They're very good in maneuvering the Taliban restrictions. They're good in hiding. They're good in using weapons and everything. So because of that, there is a very strong focus from the Taliban on special forces. And throughout the investigation, we realized that it's not only like the people that they have on their radar. So anyone they arrest, they heavily torture them for finding more contacts for their colleagues. And in some cases, they let some of the special forces in their custody just when they felt that they can bring them more people or contacts for more people. And like some of the special forces that we talked to, they were under the Taliban surveillance for a long time. Like outside Afghanistan, they would reach out and they were kind of dragged to Afghanistan to come. And then like the way they were arrested, it's not like the Taliban regular fighters who would go after them. Like they make a very strong plan to arrest them, like with civilian cars, with people in local clothing. So they have a very strong focus on special forces, and they're chasing them everywhere. So like when they're entering from neighboring countries to Afghanistan, they try to identify them in border. If that doesn't happen, then like they have people in provinces specifically assigned for these tasks to find them out. And like whenever they arrest special forces, and for whatever reason they release them, they tell them that like if next time we find an excuse to arrest you, we will kill you. And those conversations that were told to us between the Taliban commanders or officials, like they just say like, why we are holding them, let's kill them. Like they have done everything they could in the past, and now it's time, we should take our revenge. And in some cases, because these military bases were in specific districts, and people of those districts were alongside the Taliban. So those people were also after special forces. They knew them, and they, like, when they were back in Kabul, they were trying to find them. And when they find them, like, they were just trying to take their revenge, because when special forces carry out an operation in their district, someone was hurt or something happened, and they were just trying to take their revenge.
Sure. And so you mentioned torture. What kinds of torture were special forces personnel being put through to obtain that information about who they worked with and who else might be a target for the Taliban? What did you uncover during this investigation?
So generally, the torture is very intense. The first tactics are that they don't let them to sleep, and then like beating, particularly in places that are not very visible, to avoid any risk of them going back to media, which is currently not possible anyway. But they take all the precautions to avoid leaking it out, and then after that, they put their head under cold water, stop the block their breathing, and if that doesn't work, then they put plastic bags on their head to block breathing, and that can cause like severe damages even after they got released, like headache or in some cases like psychological problems. And if that doesn't work, then they remove their nails, and that's like the most severe thing they do generally.
Wow. And I've heard some cases of like electrical shocks or like being, just there have been some nasty. The Taliban are merciless when they want to get something out of you, but a lot of these guys, it sounds like they're not giving up the information if they can help it. And I don't know. I don't know if I could handle that. Is that, are they then the people that you've talked to who've gone through the torture, why were they eventually released? Was it because they thought that they might get more information out of them, or for some other reason?
The main reason is that it's already very difficult to get any information from those guys, and like the tortures that they describe, like making them stand on one of their feet when the other feet is like tied to a rope for like 10-15 hours, or hang them upside down like for many hours. But when they kind of realize that they're not getting anything out of that, or they get something but that's not enough, then they tell them, okay, we will release you, but like you should work for us, you should like find other more people and bring them, or like share the contact information. Like in some cases they might say like, okay, like I have my phone but I don't have all that information here, like that's at home, or like I have saved it somewhere else. So like both sides are kind of playing, and from what we have saw, the Taliban are taking like a lot of risk, releasing them just for like a potential of bringing more people, or like identifying more people. And the main excuse for arrest is mainly that like you didn't hand over your rifle or your gun, or whatever you had. And in some cases these guys should sell their car or house or anything they have to pay like a third party to release them. That's also one of the things, but generally like they should provide guarantees, and once they got released, so they will tell the guarantor that like I will be not here, so better you also flee from the country. And that's how they like what they do is to leave the country, because they know that like if they stay there, they will find them again, and this time they will be merciless. And in couple cases that's what happened, that like when they got arrested second time they were killed.
Sure. And that is, there are so many accounts I've seen, particularly people coming back from Iran. I don't know why that seems to be the thing I see most on like X, but there are still accounts that people are being deported back to Afghanistan, and then they're getting plucked up almost immediately and murdered. And it's not a lot, but I think that I'm trying to think, like Natik Malikzada told me that he knows of a dozen cases personally since Iran began their mass deportation scheme, and most of them are Tajik. It's just, it continues. So are you still working on finding these additional reprisal cases, or are you focused on getting the information out about the ones that you've already identified and verified?
So currently our focus is on the cases that we already identified, but we are monitoring the situation, and will probably have a follow-up if the cases keep rising. And with the current situation in Iran, like it is almost impossible for former special forces to live there. And once they are deported, I think the Iranian side is also like kind of flagging them possibly, because there is like a sort of agreement on that side, because they're safe inside Iran, but once they leave, there is like a very similar pattern of people getting arrested right after deportation from Iran. And the other thing is like when people get deported from Iran, they go they should go through the biometric, the Taliban biometric in Afghanistan side of the border, and that's where they identify them. So if they don't arrest them on the spot, they know where they're going, and then they can arrest them.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. The Taliban's whole biometric capability, which is expanded. I think BBC did a huge article about the CCTV facial recognition system they have in Kabul. It's absolutely insane. So they can absolutely figure out who you are, and that's very dangerous. So I guess let's talk about the US RAP program, because these are in many cases some of our closest allies, the special forces personnel, right? We know that they worked with American forces, and yet what kind of protection did we give them when we departed the country, Fahim?
So the problem with special forces was that because they didn't work directly for the U.S. government, they were not eligible for SIV. And like part of the contracts that they have with the companies working in Afghanistan, so they would fall under either P1 or P2. And most of them applied for P1 and P2. But that process was already very slow, and you could only apply if you were in a third country. So imagine you're like a former Afghan Special Forces, you don't have a passport, and would you risk it to go to the passport department, have your biometrics, and then because we heard a lot of people got arrested when they were trying to take passports. So that's already very difficult for them to get out of Afghanistan. And like the Pakistani visa is another thing, because you cannot go to Iran as there is no US embassy there. So the only place is Pakistan, and the visa is very expensive. We are talking like about a task force that or a group of people that they were not able to work in the past 4 years. They were in hiding, so like any saving or any help from friends, that's not enough at this point anymore. Um, so and with the current situation, P1 and P2 is fully suspended. So there is basically no pathway. The veteran community is trying hard, but like for Afghans, Afghan special forces that is hardly surviving inside Afghanistan and hiding. So like going to a third country is something almost impossible for them, and that's how like they are kind of stuck between going to Iran and facing a deportation which will flag them, or staying inside Afghanistan and like keep living in hiding, which is also very, very, very difficult.
Especially for somebody who was at the tip of the spear as a special forces operator, having to live in hiding. I've had many veterans groups talk to me about this in the past, about how hard it is for them mentally to go from being able to do so many things for themselves and go kick ass, and take names. And now they have to live in fear inside of a place where they can't even move with freedom. It's very destabilizing. And then it's destabilizing for the Americans who supported them. So let's talk a bit about that. How many cases were you able to connect to American units in particular?
So, like at least 4 cases that we talked to them, they had worked closely with American forces during the war.
And were you able to speak to the Americans who knew those individuals who had been killed in the reprisals? What was that like did they know already, or were you breaking the news to them? How did that happen?
They were, in most cases, very closely in contact with people there. In most cases, they were providing the support they could. And but the sad reality is that there is no legal pathway for those people to leave Afghanistan, and there is not much that they can do. But we have heard from them that these forces were like one of the most professional forces that they ever worked, and the current situation of them was very sad for them to hear about and to talk about. But like at the end of the day, when you think realistically, there is basically very less that they can do. It's all dependent to the government to change the regulations or show some flexibility for these allies to come back to safety.
I hear you saying that, and I know that is factually correct, right? But I know from the veterans that I've spoken to who cared about somebody who continue to care about somebody in the country, who are able to devote the assets and who have been for years, like they know that it's the government's job and that the government is failing, but they take it personally and it hurts them so badly. And so I just can't imagine the feeling of, think about it. 2 to 3 years, you've been supporting this person, trying to keep them alive, giving them whatever, sometimes medical care, which you have to like get a doctor to go to their home because they can't go to a doctor. You've got to get them food packages and food drops, which includes so many different things. I mean, I've done a little bit of that work. That's why I know how difficult it is. And when it's somebody personally, it becomes, you just see it all over these guys' faces because I've had those conversations. So that it's the government, but when that person is coming to you, it just feels like it's very personal. And so I'm sure that it's hard to extricate those two things, especially when you have so much moral injury already in the veteran community, when you've put so much into this and now the government has failed you. And just, I mean, in Pakistan in general, right? You've got mass deportations from Pakistan, even of U.S. RAP individuals. And so now you've got a whole, anyway, I'm not going to belabor this topic. I'm so passionate and angry about it myself that I'm just going to stop myself. Why do you think it's important for the world right now to see that this is continuing and that the Taliban's amnesty that they re-promised like 4-6 months ago, that it's all nonsense? Why is it really important for this to get out right now?
Well, these people who went to army, like at the beginning of the war, they were very young guys, and they trusted the world. Like a big portion of the world was in Afghanistan, and they choose their careers relying on the world, and they thought like there was a government building process, there was like a democracy building process in Afghanistan, and they wanted to defend that democracy. And now world is not interested in Afghanistan anymore, and these guys are between life and death, and they don't have a way to walk away. Like if daily life that they experience is basically torture, that you don't have a job, no one is ready to hire you, you cannot escape the country, you don't have the means, and like you dedicated yourself for such a big goal for your people, for your country, and for the world, that they had the commitment back then that like we will stand for with Afghanistan for as long as they need us. So they all counted on those things. And now, like, unfortunately, like, people are even not interested in hearing those stories. So we think it's important for them to hear those stories and to have it on the record somewhere that, like, these guys really tried their best, and they put their life on the table. And now, like, they're abandoned, and no one wants to talk about them and listen to them or support them. And like, the amnesty is like just in words, because it's not one or two cases. We have been seeing like there are like tons of those cases, and it's very systematic.
Absolutely it is. I've always said you can't trust the Taliban. Whatever they tell you, don't believe it. With a couple exceptions. But mostly just don't know. If they say that they're not going to kill you, probably be afraid that they're going to kill you. If they say that they're going to respect the rights of women, laugh and then run. And here's I want to take this to like the geopolitical level, because right now, by the time that this comes out, I will have put out this piece, but it's, these border skirmishes between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And then the fact that Amir Khan Mataki right now is in India, and that while he was in India, the Taliban were allowed to say no women can come into this Indian seminary, where the Indian officials had said, that's cool, they can just be behind a veil. And the Taliban said no. And they pushed their disgusting misogynistic worldview out to another country. And the countries just keep falling. We watched in Germany that, they accepted the Taliban diplomats into Germany to come talk about sending Afghans back. And then the Taliban said, well, we want to raise our flag here. And the German government's like, what? It's like, I'm sorry, did you not think this was going to happen? We are normalizing a terrorist regime worldwide The only people who seem to realize it are Pakistan, which is hilarious because that's where they were safe for 20 years. It's just like all of these things are happening, and nobody's paying attention. Nobody's paying attention to our allies who are being slaughtered. And I'm just so glad that you're doing this right now. It's a horrible thing to have to look at. It's a horrible thing to have to study. But if nobody does, then there is no record of it. And there needs to be, because we're going to regret everything. India is going to regret bringing the Taliban there. Germany is going to regret allowing the Taliban, especially if they let them fly that flag there. This will come back to bite the world. And there needs to be a record. So anyway, I'm on record now saying that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Fahim. I've just gone off on my...
I think the fact that when the Taliban took over Kabul and they had like an acting government, that was because they thought they would be not normalized and they would have to do a compromise. But I think they were surprised by the reaction from different countries in the world, and then they said, okay, let's like just get rid of like the acting government, and we are here. So now they're taking their approach to other countries, and they do whatever they want, as you said in Germany or in India. But the problem is like the Taliban is an ideology, and it's not possible for an ideology to change, because if it's changed, it's no more the Taliban, so it's like something different. So I think the world should pay attention to this situation, and it wouldn't be only the Afghans who will suffer. It will spread to other parts of the world.
Yeah, I've always said too, because Heather Barr from Human Rights Watch came on and talked about how the misogyny of the Taliban was going to harm women everywhere. And I mean, India just showed that, right? Like it's happening. And yeah, when do we get allies as Americans again? When people see what we've done to our Afghan allies and what we've done with the U.S. RAP. And right now, the U.S. RAP, yes, it's suspended. But what's going to happen? Are we going to allocate the right number of future spots? And what I just can't even fathom. I have avoided addressing it because of the sheer sadness in the U.S. RAP population. I mean, people have killed themselves in Pakistan rather than face deportation to Afghanistan, because they'd rather die by their own hand than have the Taliban kill them. And what happens if that doesn't, if there's no hope, and they feel like there's no hope, and you've got all these allies, including our special forces allies. Anyway, like I said, I'm taking this. There's just too much going on in the world, Fahim, and it's so hard to contain it right now into like this very specific thing. But that being said, can you share some of the specific things that you've found? Like, maybe a couple stories that you've found during this research that would show people what happens in a reprisal event, and what, how families have been impacted, and what this means at a human level when someone is a victim to the Taliban.
In one of the cases, a member of former special forces was hiding in his house after like multiple attempts in Kabul airport to get outside, but which didn't work. And then the Abbey Gate incident happened, and he decided that we will stay in Afghanistan, and whatever happens. He was there with his wife and a very young daughter, and then he was living in hiding for a while, and one evening something happens. He leaves the house, tells his wife that he will be back at 7 p.m. He doesn't come at 7 p.m. The wife starts panicking and calling him. Someone answers his phone, but it's only the Taliban song, and no one is talking on the other end of the line. She waits for several days, and then she realizes she was reached out by the Taliban that her husband was in the custody of the Taliban for 40 days. And then after 40 days, he get released, and he was told that if we arrest you next time, we will kill you. And then he had to flee to one of the neighboring countries. And when he was working there, he had to do tough jobs in a warehouse. And like as the pressure got more and more on Afghan refugees, so one day when he was out to bring some bread from a bakery, he got arrested by police. And then like after spending a couple of days in the deportation camp, he reached out to his wife and said that like he will be deported and they need to join them. They got deported back to Afghanistan, and they were living for some time in Kabul, and then they decided to go to Mazar-e Sharif and live in Mazar-e Sharif. And then like when they were back in Kabul for visiting some relatives, on that night on the host's house, the Taliban showed up and killed him in front of his wife and daughter.
That's horrifying.
And they weren't allowed to hold a funeral or burial ceremony for the guy. They had to bury him secretly. And then he was labeled as an ISIS member.
That's the real disgusting thing that they do. And they've been doing this for years, labeling people as, you know, oh, he was a thief. He was a member of ISIS. He was a something. And no, he was a member of the Afghan National Police. No, he was a member of the Afghan Special Forces. I find that to be like the culminating, just like the slap on the face after the horrifying event, is that you then try to brand them as some traitorous terrorist or thief. That's terrible. How are the family? Can you share anything about how the family are doing? Because obviously now this woman is a woman-headed household in a country where women cannot work at most jobs, cannot speak in public, cannot travel without a mahram. So if she doesn't have a male relative to go with her someplace, she can't, you know, just what does her life look like now?
She is living in one of the neighboring countries, and she's both father and mother for her kids, and doing like rough jobs during the day to pay for the expensive, living on like on real survival. Like some nights they have like enough bread, some nights they don't have but they just prefer to be away and be safe at least. And like there is no hope for her for safety or like for education of her kids. Like that's the very, very difficult situation to experience. But yeah, that's what she's going through.
Yeah, and I know that in a lot of those countries, like if you're a refugee, you're not allowed to work. The work you're doing is under the table often, and I don't know if that's the case in where she is, but you know, in those places, I know someone who went to Turkey actually and was doing, you know, very menial work, and it was always a question of, are the police going to come today and raid the place and send all the Afghans back? And you can't send your kids to school as a refugee in most countries, which is just heinous. You know, depriving them of the ability to better themselves, and then losing that. Was that family involved in the U.S. refugee admissions program, or did they not have a referral?
I think they didn't have a referral. Like they had whatever they could from like, working with the special forces, but they weren't referred to a specific program.
Okay.
And because like they were living in hiding and fear, so it was basically not possible for them to try and find a referral or any of the advisors.
Sure.
So yeah, they just give up on that possibility and try to like find a solution themselves, and it seems it didn't work for them.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning, too, that if you want to be in those programs, you need to have access to the internet and a phone. because you have to be able to correspond with the US government. And if you're in a job where you're barely making ends meet, how are you going to afford to keep up with, like, it's just, it actually costs you money to try to just get into the process of that. And you end up putting in a lot of time. I know I've spent a lot of time corresponding with Afghans in the SIV and USROP programs who are just overwhelmed not hearing back. And I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, the Afghan Adjustment Act that was put forward so many times under the Biden administration and never passed would have, I think, given those special operators direct access to P1 and P2, because some of them didn't qualify. I think it was P1 and P2, not SIV. But it would have expanded the admissibility, and it would have captured more people than we already did. And so it's just, it's another opportunity missed to protect these people. And it's unconscionable.
Exactly, and like lack of those programs make it very difficult for these people to like find a solution for their situation. Like they're tired of what's happening with them, but they don't know what could be a solution for the situation. Like the Taliban has no flexibility, and like with the U.S. government, there's a lot of obstacles with the process for them. So yeah.
It's really sad. Well, Fahim, is there anything else you want to talk about the investigation, about specific cases, anything? The floor is yours to bring up, and we can go into that.
I want to talk about like one of the other cases that we investigated. He was also working very closely with special forces, with American special forces, and he was in some point in his career he also worked with U.S. government, so he was eligible for SIV, but his SIV didn't got approved. So he was very hopeful for P1 that he applied for, and it was almost at the end of the process. And then suddenly the whole process got suspended, and he was living in a third country, and like he got some support from the veteran community, but like you know that didn't last forever, and like the times when he wouldn't be able to reach to his U.S. colleagues, like he would be in real panic, and this is one of the people that went through Taliban custody, and he experienced like severe torture, and he was just let out of the custody because like he kind of managed to give them like fake promises of like bringing more people, and then someone guaranteed him, and right after he left, he told his guarantor that like he's leaving the country, and like whatever happens, so he should find a solution for himself as well. And like now he's in a very difficult situation. Like he sometimes he's not able to communicate with his American colleagues, and like he's in a serious panic, and he don't know like what will happen to him. Like he overstayed his visa, and now like he cannot work because he's facing challenges because of the expired visa with his rental place, so they're asking him to leave. Like it's a very difficult situation, and it's not one or two cases. Like almost all of them are living in that same situation.
Yeah, the visas are extortionately expensive. You're told, you know, you can stay if you pay a bribe, but you know that they're going to come back and ask for another bribe. I don't know. It's anyway. That's it's really frustrating to see all of the pain that, US RAP was already terrible. It was terrible under President Biden because nobody was moving on it. And part of that is Pakistan's fault because they didn't want to process. I think that finally came out like a year and a half in, that Pakistan was digging their heels in and didn't want to allow for an RSC to be built inside of Pakistan where people would have 12 to 18 months that they needed to be processed. And so that was the initial holdup. But after that, it's like, why are we still having a holdup? We could have had people safe. We could have had a lot of people safe. And now, unfortunately, we have a lot of people in fear. More than fear. Fear is not a strong enough word for what is facing people right now.
Exactly, yeah. There are people who lost their family members who were in special forces, and because of that their loved ones were killed, but they're still living in fear and in hiding. They're not able to work because they're afraid that the Taliban will come after them as well and punish them as well. In some cases, like when they were not able to find the special forces member, they arrested his brother or his father, someone that they could put pressure on them and bring them to custody. So it's really a horrible situation, and the U.S. and other countries who work together with special forces, they really need to pay attention to this situation. These are lives at risk, and they need to be taken to safety.
Sure. And I mean, if we want to do something like retake Bagram or, whatever, if there's ever an opportunity for the Taliban to be taken out of power, or for there to be a power sharing agreement of some variety that allows there to be another Afghan national army that isn't just the Taliban, who do you want in that? You want the special forces that have already been trained, that have already been doing the job. We're going to need those people and their skills and capabilities. And you're letting them languish instead, and you're letting them get killed. And they also know something of American tradecraft and American weapons systems, and just they have a lot of important information on top of the fact that they are humans that we should be caring about. There's so many reasons that the U.S. should be doing better in this regard, and I can't think of a single reason to defend the way that the U.S. has treated these individuals. So, are there any other stories or important things to touch on here, Fahim, that you can think of?
I think no. That's all of the important things that I had in my mind, and I think I described it.
Yeah, I think you did too, and I am really looking forward to seeing the report, which I know by the time that this comes out, the report will be out. People will be able to see it. I think you guys are putting it out with Military Times, right? Is that? Yeah. So if people missed it, they can find it there, and just spread the word. I think that's all we can do now. Tell our representatives, our senators, hey, this is still happening. Stand up for the U.S. RAP program. Stand up for your allies. There are still, as far as I know, there are 2 bills in House and Senate that are supposed to do what the AAA was going to do. In fact, one of them is the AAA, and the other one is Evacuate Our Allies Act or something, and it's basically the AAA. And so tell them you want that passed, and you want those protections given to our special forces personnel so that this doesn't keep happening. We can stop it, or at least try to stop it. Fahim has a letter from one of the wives of the reprisal victims that we're going to read. Obviously, at the end of every episode, there used to be a letter from an Afghan, just to make sure that the voices of Afghans were being heard. And in this case, I think it's really important that this voice is heard. So, Fahim, I will let you take it away.
This letter is from Ali Gul's wife. He was a member of Special Forces and was killed by Taliban. The letter is from Hawa. She is the mother of 2 lovely daughters, and she's living outside Afghanistan currently. I will start reading the letter. I am a woman from Bamiyan province of Afghanistan. In 2019, I got married to a man named Ali Gul in Kabul. He was a member of the Afghan Army Special Forces. We had started our life together with big hopes for the future. Ali always said that he had heard that the daughters love their fathers more. So, from the very first day of our marriage, he said that if our first child was a girl, he would choose her name. Less than a year later, our first child was born, and Ali named her Hannah. One day I asked him about the meaning of this name. He said that it comes from Hebrew and means God, grace, and mercy. He said that this girl is God's gift to us. His love for Hannah was very deep from the very first day. When he would return from job, Hannah would lovingly reach to him, and when he would leave, she would cry and be restless. It wouldn't be easy to calm her down. At those moments, Ali would repeat his famous saying, "I am a soldier, and a soldier always has to leave. You guys should be strong." As the security situation worsened in the last months of the Republic, Ali came home less often. His movements were restricted, and every time he left the house, Hannah tried to stop him with the tears and childish struggle. But no protest would work until the day when Kabul collapsed. Ali never realized that the country was heading toward a disaster. It was the day after the collapse that we realized, and it was too late. A large part of the Afghan special forces were evacuated when the Americans were still present at the airport, but Ali wasn't among them. We went to the airport gates together for several nights in a row, but we were unable to get in. One day, when the explosion at the Abbey Gate happened, we were only about few hundred meters away from the scene of the incident. After that, Ali said, "It's not possible anymore. We are staying here. Whatever happens, happens." In the first week of the Taliban takeover, they started house-to-house searching to find former soldiers. Ali rarely left the house. The most painful days were when he couldn't even take Hannah to the street just outside our house. We live at a Kabul neighborhood, and one evening, after a short phone conversation with someone, he told me that he was going to visit a friend in another neighborhood and would come back soon. When I called him around 7 p.m. in the evening, the phone was answered, but on the other end of the line, there was only the sound of the Taliban sound, and no news from Ali. A few days later, we learned that he had been arrested. They tortured him like a prisoner of war for nearly 40 days. Due to Hannah and my constant visit and insist to the place where he was held, we were able to see him 2 or 3 times in the last 10 days of his custody. Every time he saw us, he would say, "Don't bring Hannah to the detention center again." But before we reached home, Hannah would insist again to see her father. After 40 days, when they found no evidence to convict him, he was released. Just remembering the torture signs all over his body still brings pain to my heart. Almost his entire body was black and swollen. He couldn't even sleep on his back. He would wake up screaming at night. If anyone spoke loudly, he would be scared. Until the day he was shot in Kabul, he suffered from severe headache caused by the torture. He told me they put his head in a plastic bag and suffocated him for hours to talk, but he had nothing to say. But they tortured him to death. As soon as he could walk again, we decided to leave Afghanistan through illegal routes. through illegal routes. Because when he was released, they had told him that if he was arrested again, he would not survive. With great difficulties, we reached to one of the neighboring countries. We lived with relatives for a while until Ali got a job at a commercial transportation center in one of the cities. We stayed there for about a year. We just felt that maybe we could breathe a little easier for few mornings. Hannah's relationship with her father was deep again. Ali would sometimes take her to work with him, or we would go together to the park. Although the pressure of the neighboring country's police on the migrants was increasing day by day, we were happy to be away from the hell of Kabul. Sometimes memories of our days in Kabul and our trips to our favorite restaurant in the city would take us to the restaurants in the city we lived. With Ali's small income, we enjoyed life as much as we could. But it seemed that those few days were the last opportunity and happy moment of our lives. Ali got an ID card from the local government as a former member of the Afghan National Army. He was working in a warehouse, unloading goods during the day and guarding the warehouse at night. We lived in a small room in the same warehouse. Most nights, the owner would bring us bread from the bakery, and Ali rarely went out to get bread himself. One night, when no one was there to bring bread, Ali came out of the warehouse door and was grabbed by the police at the door and taken to the deportation camp. From there, he called me and said that he might be deported to Afghanistan. When he realized that he had no way back, he asked the police to postpone his border crossing for one night so that Hannah and I could reach him. We went to the camp with a small suitcase of clothes, and then the three of us were forced to return to Afghanistan. The ID given to him by the local government didn't stop him from deportation. When we arrived in Kabul, we stayed there for a short time because I was pregnant. Ali lived in hiding the entire time. When we were in Kabul and after the birth of my second daughter, Elena, we went to Mazar-e-Sharif. When living in Mazar-e-Sharif, we had to come back to Kabul to visit someone. And when we were visiting, at the first night, the Taliban came to the house. They jumped over the wall and entered to the house. Ali knew there was no escape this time. He tried to escape, but they shoot him in front of me and my children. They still haven't let me see his face one last time or hold a funeral. Today, Hannah remembers her father every day and asks why he doesn't come back to take us out. And how painful are the moments when she asks why the Taliban shoot his father. And to this day, I don't have an answer to this question and countless other questions she has. Elena is my little girl, but before she could feel the warmth of her father's hand, she was deprived of him forever.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. I'm really glad that you read that. Thank you so much, Fahim, for being here and talking about these really hard things and letting me pontificate about the state of things in Afghanistan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really good to talk about it. I think it's a very important topic, and we need to spread the word, as you say, as that's the least thing we can do at this moment.
Yeah, raise your voices, make good noise. Thank you all for joining us, and Tasha Kor, and hope to see all of you again soon.